I was like, okay, how do I actually get the value from this experience? And one thing that struck me was that I was going to be exposed to a new network of people, which felt valuable at the time. And so I decided to set up the Entrepreneurship Society at the University of Nottingham, which is where I went to university, to basically bring together like all the kids, the students at uni just wanted to start businesses or had already had a business, so I could meet these people and learn from them. And
inspired from your experience working for your cousin.
Yeah, exactly. You know, because I was like, I'm going to start a business. Like that's what I want to do. By that, you know, I was already set on that.
Ben, welcome to the UnbrandMe Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. The UnbrandMe Podcast is the bandwagon podcast that invites founders, entrepreneurs, brand builders to the show to discuss how the lives of the brands that they've built have intertwined to their own life journeys. And you've got a phenomenal life journey, which I can't wait to unpack.
Yeah.
So welcome to the show. There's something that we believe in at Brandwagon, which is better people make better brands, and better brands make a better world. And as I was researching through, the web of interviews with Ben Grech, I came across this really interesting quote. There aren't that many. It's quite a hassle for me to find out some more information. Yeah. But there was this quote which really stood out. I see companies as a great vehicle for change. They can deliver the positive kind and improve the world. So you could say that I'm driven by the opportunity to create or accelerate positive change, especially if I think that it will have a lasting impact, which really struck a chord. And that's pretty much what I want to focus on today. So, I mean, Ben, you're an investor, you're the CEO of Reposit, which you invested in. You're a co-founder and a board member of Uniplaces, a business which went from zero to hero in like a super lightning bolt moment.
Yeah.
A business which you started with two other friends when you were still 23.
Yeah.
And this is post your rock band years, yeah?
Yeah.
We'll get into that in a second.
Yeah, I had to bring that one up.
Of course I had to bring it up. You can't just say things before a podcast and expect that I'm not going to bring them up. And you also worked in private equity before all this.
That's right, yeah.
So Ben, the question you've been dreading since we started this podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Who are you?
Yeah, who am I? Well, I've seen your shows with other people, and that was the question that definitely gave me the most anxiety coming onto this show today.
You're very welcome.
But I think, how can you take that question, right? Is it like you are what you do, or, but I think parents, if I think about how my parents and friends would have described me, I think I've always had a sense of wisdom beyond sort of my stage of life, which has always been very helpful for like keeping me out of trouble. I felt that, sometimes I was always very observant as a kid. So you sort of see, how people are, how people act, what people do, what goes right, what goes wrong, and try to sort of learn and figure your way out, from when you're a very young person, figure things out for yourself, right? And I think there's been a sense of I feel like I've had a sense of wisdom that's sort of guided me through those times and decisions and stages of life. My mum would say that I'm very persistent. That was a common theme, I think, much to her frustration when I was a kid. School teachers, I think in every school report, it says Ben gets distracted easily. So obviously, quite sort of hyperactive in some ways, and curious, and definitely, I think I've definitely always had a curious mind, and never satisfied when teachers say, well, you don't need to worry about why that is, just kind of learn it for the exam. It's like, no, I am worried about why that is. You got to tell me now, So yeah, curious, persistent, and I think Uniplaces came about through force of will, more than anything, to be honest. Although there were definitely some macro factors that we can talk about as well, that sort of carried us along that wave. Does that give you a good sort of initial overview?
I think it's great. You're actually the first person to mention what teachers said about them in their school reports. I think that's probably a good question we should start asking our guests in the future. And it's really interesting because you did mention curiosity, which is a theme that comes up in every single podcast that we do. Yeah. But where curiosity meets persistence is probably exactly where you are. And I think your curiosity was always there pushing you to ask better questions, which gave you better answers to help you build and obviously give you more wisdom to help you build what you're building next.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you could argue that my sort of introduction to business was born out of a curiosity. Because, you know, you look around you when you're young and you see what people are doing. And I felt like the mantra when you're going through school was very much this, you're on this conveyor belt, right? Which everyone is very familiar with. And I'm sure everyone laments to some extent at some point in their life. You know, you're going through school, you do your exams, then you get a job, and, you know, get married, retire, die. You know, it's kind of feels pretty monotonous. Yeah. And I was like, no. I was like, that's not how I want my life to be. You know, there must be a better way. So I think getting into business was a result of my search of looking for a better way. I didn't want to do a job that I didn't enjoy. You know, I wanted to find work that I enjoyed, that was rewarding financially and, you know, fulfilling as well. And, you know, my parents, obviously everyone sort of looks to their parents at some point. My dad was a doctor, you know, and this was before they had working hours controls. So he was literally doing like 120-hour weeks, you know, you rarely see him, working super hard. And, you know, I don't think they paid particularly well, you know, especially earlier in your career and stuff. So it just seemed like, wow, you know, I think he did get fulfillment from his work, right, for sure. But there didn't seem to be much other reward for it. You know, my mum was a single mum and, you know, she always put us first, and work was a necessary, you know, evil. I think during that time of our lives, especially because she was prioritizing us and it was like juggling lots of things. I think she also does get a lot of fulfillment from her work. But at the time it felt like it was a
rat race,
an obligation. Yeah. For her. And I was sort of thinking, well, where are the people that like enjoy their work, that are doing amazing things and are getting paid for it. Right. And I think people who know me probably say I mention my cousin quite a lot because he's been a definite role model for me over the years. And he started a company called IP Group, which was basically designed to commercialize intellectual property coming out of universities. And I sort of heard through the family grapevine that he was doing some sort of thing that no one really understood in the family. And I was like, well, that sounds interesting. Like, let me, you know, see if I can find out a little bit more. And ended up doing an internship with him.
Okay. How old were you then?
18, 17, 18. I think it was like that. It was pre-uni. It was like A-levels, maybe 16, 17, 18, something like that. And went up to his office in Oxford. And I was like, you know, I just got this buzz, like this really visceral buzz when I was in that office. Like I wasn't doing anything useful, but I was hearing like what everyone was talking about, what he was talking about. He gave me some like contracts to read. And I remember there was a piece of software they were selling to NetJets at the time. And I was like, okay. And it was like a 1 million down payment, whether the software worked or not. And then it was like 30 million if it works and stuff like that. It was to streamline air traffic control. And it was a mathematical problem that they'd solved. And I was like, this is amazing. I was like, this is what I've got to be doing, you know?
That's pretty foundational, though, when you're still 17, 18, just going through getting exposed to such
100%. 100%. And it also challenged a lot of my worldviews. Like we met one of his colleagues, who I won't name, but worth like 300 million or something like this. And we went to the pub and sat down, you know, with a beer. I must have been 18, right? We're having a beer.
Of course. And for the record, he was definitely 18.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, we were just chatting away. And then this guy walks into the pub with like, you know, sort of like Adidas tracksuit bottoms and a sort of yellow stained t-shirt. And I was like, you know, who's this guy? And then my cousin was like, Ben, meet, you know, my friend, you know. And I was like,
300 million.
Yeah, I was like, this guy's worth 300 million. It was just like, boom, you know, like all sort of stereotypes of like wealthy people. And I think the thing that I really learned was, you know, there are a lot of these people here that I'm meeting that are wealthy. They're enjoying their work. They're doing amazing things. Like they were on the, you know, on the edge, on the forefront of science and technology development and stuff. And it's like, well, these are the people that are pushing things forward in the world. And they weren't like mean kind of fat cats. They were very nice people, very smart people, very happy with what they were doing and making a lot of money. And I was like, okay, I found it. You know,
that's it. That's the secret sauce.
Yeah, exactly. So that definitely inspired me early on. Yeah.
And you got into asking the right questions when you were still 14, planning your GCSEs, yeah?
Yeah, I suppose so. I think it was that search to find not being satisfied with the answers that you're being presented with, like from school, and
not
just
the standard pathways.
Yeah, and I looked to books. Books have always been a guiding, source of information for me, for sure, because you're like, wow, the best investor. Look at Ben Grech. I remember reading one of his books when I was like 15. He was. I think he was a forerunner of Warren Buffett. And it's like how to make money from the stock markets, and I was like, okay, so you can make money other than selling your time, and just starting to like explore these ideas and trying to find my own answers. Yeah.
So what was the very first €100 you invested? Where did you invest your very first £100?
Good question. So I think the first sort of business idea I did was at college, sort of A-levels. We used to have a college boat party. It was a genius idea because on the river you can drink when you're under 18. So it was a really good idea. Some student who was obviously much smarter than I was had thought about this. And the school used to sort of somehow support it, or it's done through the sort of students' body, and they used to organise it. It was okay, yeah. But then by the time I got to the A-level stage, the school was like, no, this isn't happening anymore. So no longer allowed, no longer condoned. And I was like, well, I'll just do it. I'll just organise this party then, So basically just took it upon myself to organise a boat party for 200 17-year-olds, getting everyone up to London on coaches and then doing this boat, renting the boat, selling tickets, and we had to make it all work. And I remember counting the money on my bedroom floor, and I had this rug and it was filled with like piles of £20 notes.
Fantastic.
And I was like, look at this, I'm in business, It was so funny. I think we ended up making a loss because there was an issue with one of the coaches and some student broke a seat or something, and we didn't get our deposit back, and so we didn't quite make it on that one. But that was probably my first project/business. Luckily they got better.
Well, you wouldn't be here if they didn't, I guess. But we learn from our mistakes now.
Yeah, but the first investment was actually, so the same cousin, he obviously, I was talking to him about these things, and he obviously saw that I was interested in investing and finance and stuff. So I somehow managed to convince him to put some money in alongside my sort of £1,000 savings that I made up, and open a trading account on, it was a company called The Share Centre. They had a website where you could do online trading. And I was like 17, 18, and we set up this trading account, and that was when I first started investing. It was some of his ideas, some of my ideas.
Fantastic.
And we started making money, and I was convinced that was how I was going to fund my gap year traveling. But
so did you go traveling?
I did go traveling, but I had to work in a call center for 6 months to save up. But we broke it. We actually kind of broke even on that, so we didn't make a loss on the trading, which was interesting. Learned a huge amount of lessons there.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
and at quite a young age. I mean, most people would have been spending their money elsewhere.
Yeah, that was always a bit weird. I remember I had a TV. My granddad was a lawyer, and he used to check stocks on teletext.
Of course.
On the TV.
Good old teletext.
And I remember I had a TV in my room, and I remember like drawing charts on. This is making me sound super weird.
We'll get to some cooler questions in a second.
Exactly.
I promise.
Well, I literally had like graph paper from school, because they would just give you the flash like updates of the share prices. And I remember you like drawing and plotting the charts. So I would check in every day and draw another point on the chart of like, Barclays share price or something like that. And so I would like draw my own graphs of the stock price from teletext. This is ridiculous.
Wow.
So I was obviously like interested in this stuff from a young age. Yeah. And that's how I remember getting into it. Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. So let's reverse back. I mean, you've got a great surname.
Yes.
But you weren't brought up in Malta.
No. So my dad went to the UK to study medicine.
Okay.
Which I think is to do with some sort of political situation that was going on in Malta at the time.
So that was the 80s, early 80s, I suppose.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I was born. You weren't yet.
Yeah, exactly. I was 88. So
yeah.
And he studied as a med student in the UK. My mum being a speech and language therapist, was also working in the NHS system. So they met through that, and then, or at least I think they did. And then I was born in the UK. I was born in Guildford in Surrey, which is a very sort of middle class bubble. Pretty unnotable as a place.
And your relationship with Malta, so you used to come here, in summers or?
That's right, yeah. We used to come here every summer for our sort of summer holidays, and it was just a great time. Summer holidays are always great, but spending time with my dad, he was super relaxed during those times, so it was a nice family time, and I just loved the sea. I loved the sun. For me, it was like if it was a heat wave, it was better. I used to be disappointed if it was 30 degrees. I wanted it to be like 35 plus. I don't know why. It's super weird maybe just because the UK was just cold all the year round, and just loved Malta. Just loved it. And after my degree, after graduating, I just booked the next flight out and just came out here for a few weeks. And that was when I met my wife actually as well.
Ah, okay. Yeah. It's quite early on, so.
Yeah.
So this is way before you started Uniplaces.
2010. It was happening at the same time, which was interesting for our relationship.
I'm sure it was very interesting. Let's talk about not the relationship. Let's talk about starting Uniplaces, because that's obviously what got you here.
Yeah.
And I mean, Uniplaces is a really interesting project, which went from super fast in terms of going from like an early startup, which was. You tell the story better. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it was really from zero. So actually, during university, I didn't want to go to university, but my dad was like, "You're going to university." I was like, "Okay, fine." So I was thinking, okay, how do I make the best of this? Because I was hearing stories, of, university's not worth it. You can just go to work and da-da-da. It was already becoming a little bit expensive for the value. Mm-hmm. This is not the old heydays where you go to Oxford and you're kind of like set for life. Now there's like 200 universities or more, and some are much better than others.
Students out.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, okay, how do I actually get the value from this experience? And one thing that struck me was that I was going to be exposed to a new network of people, which felt valuable at the time. And so I decided to set up the Entrepreneurship Society at the University of Nottingham, which is where I went to university, to basically bring together like all the kids, the students at uni just wanted to start businesses or had already had a business, so I could meet these people and learn from them. And
inspired from your experience working for your cousin.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was like, I'm going to start a business. Like that's what I want to do. By that, I was already set on that. So that seemed like a good way to sort of get the more value from that experience, and it was super exciting, and we ended up as like the best funded society on campus, like as we should be, right? So
of course.
So that was a real success, and I met my co-founders at university for Uniplaces through that network, basically.
Before we jump into Uniplaces, you were the best funded society. So you set up the society yourself, and you're already starting to get people to fund that. Who were the people who were putting money?
Like KPMG and all these grad employers that want to get their brand around campus and so on. And we ended up also, there was an enterprise lab at the university, and then they agreed to like fund some of our events. So we went out and raised loads of money from sponsorship money from KPMG and the likes. And then we didn't have to pay for anything. So it ended up like we just had loads of money in our bank. I don't know what they did with that money at the end of it, but I left and they still had it all. So
so it's not on your name still?
No, it's not my name, unfortunately. But hopefully it helped to kind of, support the society.
And so you got into raising capital already whilst you were still setting up this Entrepreneurship Society.
Yeah, that's true.
There must have been some really interesting experience there. Did it feel like you were raising cash at that point, or was just looking for money for sponsorships?
Yeah, sponsorship. And it just felt like, it was kind of an obvious one. It felt like, KPMG want to employ grads from Nottingham. If you're not sponsoring the Entrepreneurship Society, it's kind of like, what are you doing? So it felt like it was quite an easy.
I can already see you pitch this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so no, it worked, and it wasn't that hard.
Okay, so back now to you found your co-founders. Names?
Yeah. So
how did you meet? What was
Miguel
the
was
plan?
involved in the society and loads of other things. They had SIFE and Students in Free Enterprise, and he was obviously kind of interested in that stuff as well. And he then became the president of the Entrepreneurship Society after I moved on. Obviously a very fair, voting process. I was like, Miguel, you're going to be the next president. But I had to secure succession, right? And then Mariano, who was at King's College London, but that was born out of the fact that we kind of made a national network of all the entrepreneurship societies across the country. So we linked up with Oxford and King's and Imperial and so on, and which was awesome, which was kind of beyond what I expected to happen. And so I got to meet all the most entrepreneurial people, not only from Nottingham, but for Oxford and Imperial and King's. And yeah, it was amazing.
Exposure must have been
huge,
great.
Huge network, you know. And many of them are still great friends to this day, you know, which is awesome. And really met some great people during that time. And Mariano was in the King's College Business School and Business Society. So that's how I met Mariano. And both of them, they just struck me that they just had skills that were very different to my own. So Miguel, I was always like, roll up my sleeves. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do it like this. Da, da, da. If we're organising a party, like I'm doing everything, you know, or whatever. Miguel, you know, he would come to the meeting. He would just listen. You know, everyone, you know, have ideas and this, that, and the other. Loads of stuff to do. The next meeting, it's all done. And you're just like, well, how's that happened? You know? So he obviously had this kind of way with people that I didn't have, right? Frankly, it was just at that stage, I was just like, how did you just do that? And Mariano was just like a force of nature. He's just like a ball of energy. You know, he was an exceptional person. I mean, left uni whilst he was still studying or supposed to be studying to go and launch offices for Groupon in China. And his attendance in his final year of his university was 0%, but he got a first-class degree.
Legend.
So, and I remember he had an issue with the HR teacher, and she was like, no, you have to attend these classes, otherwise you won't get graded. And he was like, I've just hired 1,000 people in China. Like, I think that experience counts for something. And then she was like, okay, yeah, that's fine.
That's fine.
You know, so it was just, you know, and just, yeah, maybe lacked focus. Mm-hmm. But he was just a force of nature. You could just tell he was just some sort of force of nature. And so I felt like we were a good trio.
Absolutely.
That made me excited. Because I think by that point, I'd done other things. Mm-hmm. And I think I'd realized I'd done lots of small things, you know, like trading, parties, eBay. You know, I started selling toasties in our halls, you know, so everyone's coming back drunk and hungry. And I started selling toasties, and my bedroom drawer was full of cash. But, you know,
very enterprising.
All small scale stuff. And I sort of realized if I'm going to do anything really significant, going back to that quote, which actually is, you sort of gave me goosebumps when you mentioned that, because that is really honestly like one of the core motivators for me. I remember like lying in my bed and thinking I want to do something that makes a change, like a positive impact. If I want to do something of scale, I need a team around me that can complement me, because I can't do that on my own. I think I realized that, you know, when I was at university, and for me that was the most important, like, thank goodness I had that sort of insight, you know, because I think it's true. So Miguel and Mariano, I was like, right, we got to do something together. And then after university, I was expecting we would leave and just do something, but Miguel is Portuguese and his parents were like, no, you have to do a master's. And Mariano was off in China launching Groupon offices and things like this. So I was like, oh shit, I haven't like applied for any jobs.
I was counting on you guys.
Exactly. But it ended up through the network, finding the role at HIG.
Okay.
So that was actually a bit of a, you know, you make your own luck kind of moment, right? And it was like really well paid, and it would give me the opportunity to just save some money and bide some time whilst I was sort of planning what we're going to start as a business.
So there was no idea for Uniplaces yet?
There was no idea. It was just an idea. First.
Team first.
Yeah.
Put a team together.
Yeah.
We'll figure out what we're going to do at a later stage. Okay, so for those who don't know what Uniplaces is, and also was, I suppose, at the very, very beginning, a good brief introduction to Uniplaces.
So the easiest way to describe it is Airbnb for students and expats and people moving cities. So instead of booking 5 nights or 2 nights for your holiday, you're booking 6 months, 12 months because you're moving to a new city for a specific reason. So it was long-term, so mid-long-term rentals online, right? That was the concept. And at the time, everyone was still questioning Airbnb. Everyone was like, no one's going to book, you know,
sleep on someone's couch,
sight unseen, you know, online, like that's ridiculous. And here were we saying, no, they're going to do that. And they're going to book actually 6 months, 12 months in the same sort of way. And that's what we're going to do.
So what year was this?
This was, that's a bit of a kind of trick question because Uniplaces didn't start that way.
Okay.
Right.
So how did Uniplaces start?
So as I was saying, it's team first. So we had the team, but we didn't know what we were going to do.
You had 3 ideas now, I think.
We had 3 ideas, 2 in travel, and 1 was the Uniplaces concept. So the travel ideas, we had this kind of traveler bunch. It was called Traveler Bunch, and it was travel for groups. So it was group travel. And it was just born out of the idea that group travel, booking online group travel was actually quite complicated. You had to kind of coordinate with your friends who's booking flights, who's booking this, that, the other. It was not an easy thing. So we wanted to do group travel options, experiences, whatever, pre-packaged, ready to go, pick the number of people, and it's sort of all organized for you.
Okay.
Which perhaps not the most innovative idea, but probably served a niche. The other one,
it's probably still good work, but it's a lot of competition, eh?
It's tricky, and to be honest, it's not the sort of business I would want to be operating. You're a tour operator, basically, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure maybe you could have evolved it into something more exciting, but that's what it was. The other idea was, which we all thought was really cool, was something called Dare Trip. So it was the idea of like micro tripping. So like people just wanting to go for like a day to Barcelona or, a weekend here, there. And actually it's not a big budget trip. You don't really mind where you want to go, but you just want an experience, right? And this was becoming a bigger and bigger trend in travel. And it was the idea of like turning up to the airport and sort of booking the next flight out. And sometimes we heard you could get like discounted tickets if you did that, right? So we sort of wanted to play on that idea. And the idea was basically like sort of Russian roulette. You go online, you put your credit card details in, put your budget in, just like put your dates in and spin the wheel. And it's like, right, you're going to, Amsterdam or you're going to this. And it's like, okay, you've paid, it's booked, like these are your details, like go for it, And I still think that's quite a cool idea.
Sure.
It's quite a fun idea.
Bit of a risk element for both sides of the party.
But we thought like if you could set your budget, like you want to go
set your risk profile, set your budget.
Yeah, exactly. And
places you definitely won't want to go.
Yeah, we actually had that.
Yes?
Yeah, we had that feature. So it was you could choose places you definitely didn't want to go, but you couldn't choose where you wanted to go, right? Because there are considerations like if you need jabs or something like that. But anyway, so that was a cool idea. And then we had Uniplaces, which was born out of the idea that student accommodation was a big problem, like finding student accommodation. There wasn't enough student accommodation. It was always a mad rush. If you're an international student, it's even more problematic. And Miguel and Mariana were both international students.
So they lived through that problem themselves.
So they lived through that problem themselves. And it was interestingly a problem wherever we went. It was a problem wherever we went, whether you're in Portugal or UK or China or Chile. There's an interesting story about Chile. It's the same. You're picking sort of phone numbers off notice boards and trees and fences and calling landlords you know nothing about. And how do you do that? It was a nightmare. It was a real nightmare. And universities struggle with it. Universities really struggle with it as well.
And it's a problem because international students has been something forever. No, in the early 70s, people traveling to start studying abroad.
Yeah.
And yet, nothing.
And it's still
no
solved.
Solution.
It's still not perfectly solved. I think Uniplaces has gone a long way, but it's not solved everywhere. So it was more born out of that recognition of there being a problem. And we felt that if there was a problem and we were trying to support and help, we would be able to build some momentum behind it. So we didn't really know what it was going to be, but we kind of knew there was a problem. So that was the foundation of Uniplaces. It's probably one of the best ways to think about business ideas,
of
right?
Course.
Find
a really big problem
and try and help, because then it's easier for you to like rally support and momentum behind it.
So what was the solution? So
the solution was like boringly just having like a listings website. You've got like Craigslist and Idealista and Gumtree in the UK and all these, and just do that, but for students.
Aggregate them just for students.
It was like just for students, like that's it. So we'll aggregate it.
Hence the name Uniplaces.
Hence the name Uniplaces, exactly. But that wasn't particularly innovative. It was quick and cheap to launch. So we kind of started with a WordPress blog that we reskinned, which...
So you built that yourselves or you actually hired some...
We outsourced it.
Okay.
That was the cheapest way for us to get going. And we just started trying to like get listings and build it up like that. And sure enough, it was a problem, and the universities were interested in like us helping them to sort these things out. And the university students' unions used to have like books of landlord registers that were like they knew would provide accommodation to their students. And they would basically give us access. This was before GDPR, right? And we would just call all the landlords, right? And try and get them listing on our site. And it was super just like hacky and basic, right?
Like all the best stories.
Yeah, exactly. But we built traction. Like people started coming to the website. We built a list. We got listings. We got traffic. We had people messaging landlords. And
do you remember your first sale?
I do. It was like we did a pay to promote your listing, and we did it via PayPal, and we were all amazed that someone paid for like €5 or something to promote their listing. But it really wasn't generating revenue.
Okay.
Right. And in the early days, we raised some money. We'd gone out to sort of venture capital firms and so on, and they'd sort of said, "You're too early for us. Like there's nothing really here. You guys, you're three guys with a PowerPoint presentation and sort of three ideas, and you're not sure which one to go with, and so on." You know, it was super.
How did that blow your ego?
Yeah, not a problem. It wasn't. We weren't really worried about it, and we just kept going and kept networking, and ended up actually getting introduced to Octopus Ventures by one of the guys that was still at Surrey University Entrepreneurs. So through that network.
There you go.
And he put us in touch with Octopus Ventures, and Octopus Ventures said, "You're too early for us, but we do know some angels who occasionally invest, and maybe we can put your name to them." And they put us in touch with a guy called Alex Chesterman, who founded Love Film, which became Amazon Prime, and Zoopla, which is one of the top. It's the number 2 largest property portal in the UK. And so amazing connection.
Fantastic.
As well as and then we also met through doing startup events and things like this, some Portuguese business angels who were just starting a fund there. And so we basically put this round together of like €200,000, terrible valuation, but we needed the money. You gave away a lot of money.
You gave away a lot of shares.
Yeah, definitely, way too much. We bought some back later, and there are ways that you can figure that out. If you're successful, and that was very much our mantra. It was like we just want to be successful, and everything else will like sort itself out, sort of thing. So the next challenge was raise some money. So whatever the deal is, we'll take it. Like, let's go, kind of thing. And investors, they have some sense, and they don't want you to be completely like washed out early on. Otherwise, why would you do it, right? So there's some natural balances here. You don't have to.
As long as you're attracting the right people with wisdom.
Exactly. Yes, 100%. Because there are some bad actors out there. But it was just great. 200K, like let's go. Took us way too long. Nightmare with lawyers, picking the wrong lawyers, and this and that and the other. But we got there. Raised the money. We used some of that money to kind of develop a proper platform, but it was like a listings website still, and it wasn't making us any money. So we got to this point where it was like, I don't know, I think we had about 6 months of money left, and we'd made like €25 in revenue.
Oh my God.
And we were just like, okay, guys, this isn't working. Like, we need to start making some money. And so we started looking at the messages that students were sending to the landlords, and we realized that they weren't asking, does it have Wi-Fi or AC or this or that, to understand if it has Wi-Fi or AC. They were asking to kind of test the landlord and see if the landlord was responsive, if they were helpful, and it was a trust building exercise. And we were like, okay, that's interesting. What about if we did the trust bit and we verified everything, and then people didn't have to send all these messages and they could just book? Right? And they could just go ahead and book. So I think by the time we did that, we had like, we had about 50,000 views, like visits a month. Like we had some volume.
That's some significant volume.
And we had like, thousands of listings and so on. And we were like, okay, if we're going to do this, we basically have to kind of like tear down everything we've just done and just hand pick like the top landlords, and we'll go and like photograph their properties, learning from
Same
Airbnb.
like Airbnb did.
Yeah, 100%. So we definitely took a lot of lessons from them. The whole booking transaction piece had to be done differently because it's long term. So we're not going to take your whole stay up front. So we just took the first month, and we kind of innovated in those sorts of ways. But that was the thing. So we just kind of cut it right down, but then brought the quality, brought the trust, And sure enough, people started booking. And it was actually a really good piece of execution, like at that point, because we basically, from that moment to completely redesigning the website all over again for a booking transactional model, cutting down the listings, focusing on quality, this, that, the other. We did that, and with like 3 months to spare, we started making money. And I think in the first full month of that model, we processed like 25 grand through the site. So it was like
amazing.
It was like night and day.
I always say that sometimes desperation can be the best motivation that you could possibly get.
100%. I'm always a fan of plan A, no plan B, you know. I think it's always served me well. Like just burn the bridges, you know, just go, because then you're on a path, you know. If you still have other options, and I feel like that's you know, you live and you learn then.
I'm going to write this down before I forget, but I'll ask you the question later, but we'll get to it. Burn the bridges. Okay.
But yeah, so that served us well. And then basically we went back to Octopus Ventures and we said, hey guys, you said no to us kind of 9 months ago.
Here we are. We're doing, you know, we're processing like 25, 30 grand a month through the website. We basically validated that people will book long-term sight unseen online. So let's
go, you know? And they got interested with that. They were like, that's interesting. And sure enough, they put their money where their mouth was, and they put 750k into the business. This was 2013.
And you had already moved to Portugal then? You were living in Lisbon? Because this set off in Lisbon, right?
Yeah, we founded it in Porto.
Ah, okay.
Because it was kind of like looking for a cheap place to start. So originally in the very early days, we were in Porto. Miguel's from Porto.
Yeah, okay.
And so it's very much a sort of Portuguese success story, you know, but it was an interesting journey. And I don't think we would have succeeded in the same way if we'd started it in London as well. So that's another sort of twist and turn of events. But we then moved to Lisbon because there was nothing really happening in Porto. And Lisbon was just a bigger market and so on. So it was just made a lot more sense. But then I was also traveling a lot to London and living, and I think I moved to London in 2012. So I think I was living in partly to raise the money, right? So I was living in London when we raised the series, the sort of seed.
So you were
seed from Octopus.
Yeah, you were one of the original work from home guys.
Oh yeah, we had an office that was like 90 quid a month in Mayfair. I'm not quite sure how we blagged that.
How did you manage that?
I don't know. Yeah, that was another thing. But yeah, so then they put in the money, and then we were off.
Fantastic.
Basically, yeah.
And in fact, I mean, at that role, you were CEO already, right?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, so we never thought about it. We were always just like, we're a team trying to make this happen. And there are lots of different perspectives on, you know, can you have dual
Three
CEOs, you know, and there's been cases where it's worked, like Trivago was sort of in the early days a success story in travel, and Rolf was one of our investors, and they had 5 founders. And they always sort of made it work. But I think you've got to, if you're going to do it like that, you've got to commit to like you're in the office together, or you're together talking more often than not every day. You've got to be super aligned.
Connected, yeah.
Yeah. And to be honest, it was a bit trying for us as a 3 because we were here, there and everywhere.
Of course.
You know, so it wasn't super tenable. But I think when we raised the Series A in 2015, then it became like, okay, you got to pick, you know, which was awkward.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay. The company moved from strength to strength. You went like 10x growth in no time.
More than that.
Well,
yeah. From 2012 to 2015, when we did the Series A, and then on to 2017, you know, we went from 0 to our main metric being a marketplace. So people who know marketplaces like eBay and Etsy and these sorts of companies, they measure GMV, gross merchandise value.
Okay.
It's the amount that's been transacted through the website. And we basically took it from 0 to 65 million a year in GMV in that time frame. So
that's
from 2012 to 2017. Yeah.
Kudos.
So it was crazy. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So you're at the head, you're CEO of this amazing organization that you've built.
Yeah.
And you know, you started off 3 guys with 3 ideas.
Yeah, an idea each. I think 2 were mine and 1 was theirs, and there's 1.
There's 1. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
You know who the idea people were.
Yeah.
And And before you stepped down from CEO, how many people were employed by Uniplaces?
I think we got up to 200 in our peak, somewhere around that. Yeah.
I mean, and this is the first business that you're running.
Yeah, we started it when we were 23. Yeah.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
So, which is wild, but it also made me think.
How did it feel?
It was an intense period.
We spoke about that.
Yeah,
just an hour ago.
Yeah, and you sort of pointed out very kindly before the show that I don't look 36 because of all the grey hair.
In fact,
and I think
you make me look younger than you are. Thank you very much, Ben.
So this is what, I guess a business that age and all that sort of tension and stress, it does. But it was a hugely fulfilling experience and wouldn't trade it for the world.
Absolutely.
I
what
think
a great
learned
story.
so much, and I think you do earn your stripes, and we can talk about Reposit and so on later, but I've definitely been able to apply a lot of these lessons that I've learned now. So it's been great.
I want to take it to that moment. You're at the peak of your career. You've brought the business up to this huge level. And then and you've made this realization at some point that whilst you were the guy to take it here, you're probably not going to be the guy to take it to the next step. And this is, the perfect UnbrandMe story where you are the brand and the brand is you. And at some point, that you need to detach yourself in order to give this company the wings and open a door for the journey ahead. Yeah. How did that feel and what did you do?
That was a hugely challenging process, I suppose, personally, to kind of understand, because it's not even like you always try and pull your ego away from it, which is very difficult to do.
Of course.
And I think probably best to just acknowledge that you're going to have a level of ego playing into these decisions, but you're trying to think about what is also just right for the company. Mm-hmm. And I think after Uniplaces, so just to kind of put the context together there, we raised this Series A from Atomico in 2015, who are like a tier 1 VC founded by Nicholas Zenstrom, who founded I was going to say Stripe, I mean Skype, so the video calling software, and amazing, best deal ever. Couldn't have hoped for a better investor. They put in 15 million. Well, it was 10 from them and 5 from other sort of investors that came into the round. But we had the founders of course, of Zoopla. We had the founders of Trivago. We had the founders of King.com. We had the founders of Supercell.
All the right crew.
It was an all-star list of these great people who all of a sudden I was surrounded by, and it was just this is a dream. And I think maybe there's something in that, it's almost maybe this was too good to be true, it's should I have been pinching myself at that point? But it's difficult when you're young and you're just surrounded by all this and all these amazing people who I just felt I could learn from, so that was awesome. But we really, because we raised so much at that point, you're setting the bar so high for yourself. Basically, at that point, if you don't sell it for $500 million, plus, it's a failure, and it's kind of wow. And the business, it carried on growing after 2015. So obviously we had all this new money and we invested and we grew and it was great. But then sort of 2017, 2018, it kind of hit a bit of a plateau. And that's when you start having to look at what you're doing, introspect, and figure out what's the right path here. And then obviously, because there's so many vested interests, the team who have worked so hard over all these years, the investors, the board, everyone, customers, of course, people want to contribute and give their ideas and their input, but as the CEO, you have to make the call, right? You have to decide which way you're going, what strategy. And so what I found challenging was it was increasingly difficult to separate everyone's ideas from what I tried to really think was the right way for the business from my ego, and it's you're just battling with that sort of trifecta.
It must have been a really hard time to be.
Yeah, and you just feel, I just remember feeling an immense responsibility. Mm-hmm. And every round we raised, was everyone was because this was the heyday of 0% interest rates. VCs have tons of cash. Everyone was raising huge rounds, and they were celebrated. Raising money was success, not building a great, sustainable, profitable business. Which was kind of bizarre. So that's what you would get congratulated for and rewarded for. It's the article in TechCrunch or the BBC, So that makes it really hard as a young person to also
to analyze what's really right,
what's
for the
really
important,
important
what's right for you.
Yeah, and I think maybe what was right was to kind of slow things down, cut the burn rate of the business, figure out how to make it sustainable, but maybe acknowledge that it was no longer on the rocket ship VC path that, we'd financed it for, right? But that was hugely challenging because also your VCs are almost like, we want this to go big or kind of we don't care. We're going to write it off. So even if you think that that's the right thing to do for the business, you've got a big stakeholder there who doesn't really care if that's what happens. They just want you to go big, do everything you can. So, which is, by the way, the modus operandi of VCs in general. I'm not, Atomico are a great firm. So it was just very difficult and I felt very conflicted. And then there was huge pressure on me and your personal life and all of this sort of stuff. So yeah, it was just a very challenging time. Yeah,
I'm sure. But I mean, you took the right decisions and you moved out, right? At one point in time, you actually were responsible for hiring the next CEO.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think,
or as a team, you were.
As I was saying, I think there was a point where I remember having a conversation with an advisor. It was good to have these advisors that aren't like so involved, but they followed the journey because you can really open up. Yeah. And I remember saying to him, I said, look, I'm not sure that it's right. I'm the right CEO now, given the situation and to take the business forward, because I just felt that, as I say, everyone had their ideas, people pushing investors wanting this, and it's sort of like, I don't think I had the autonomy and the freedom that I used to have to make the decisions and move things forward in the direction that I felt was the right thing for the business. So if my idea of what was right for the business was not what everyone else wanted or thought was right, how do you resolve that?
It becomes a political game as opposed to just
100%. So at some point I sort of, we had that conversation then as a board. Admittedly, it was probably partly, brought from them as much as it was brought from me. And it was kind of like, okay, what do we do? And I think the thing that made me accept it in the end was that if we all align around someone that we're bringing in and we all feel like they're the right person to take the business to the next level, we have to give them the autonomy to execute their plan, which I felt was what was sorely needed for the business. And so I think that's the thing that made me realize that at least this would free up the business to allow it to kind of do what it needed to do next.
But Ben, that's a remarkable amount of wisdom, coming from somebody who's put, so much of themselves into a business to realize, hey, this is what's best for the business. Comes back to, that knowledge of the self and the understanding of this is what's right.
Well, I think that's very fair. I think that's not, as a more experienced CEO, I would have definitely done things differently. And 100% now.
But this was your first gig.
But as we say,
practically your first job.
Yeah, it was my first gig. It was so much success so early, and I was young, and I did have that naivety and that inexperience, let's say, to kind of handle such a responsibility so early. So I think definitely, would have handled it better.
Did the right thing.
But hopefully, And now, luckily the business has gone on to sort of trade and be profitable and do well. So
that's remarkable. Well done.
It's sort of helped for sure. Yeah.
And then, just to jump on, because I've just looking at the time, and we've gone way over what I expected. But there's so many lessons. I've just really enjoyed this. But you grabbed everything you knew, and you invested in Reposit. Yeah. And you grabbed that knowledge, and somehow you found yourself as CEO of Reposit. For those who don't know what Reposit is, because that's also a really interesting project. Yeah. What's Reposit?
Yeah, Reposit is a really smart product which is available in the UK market.
For now. I
but
keep hinting that I think you should come here. But
there are some peculiarities of the UK that make it relevant. Yeah. Which is an alternative to a tenancy deposit. So when you're renting an apartment, you have to pay a security deposit, right? And it's an arbitrary, relatively large sum of money. And there's a lot of problems with that. I mean, in Malta, sometimes, tenants might then leave without paying the last month of rent because they're worried about their deposit. Landlords might try to nibble some money, at the end, maybe unfairly, because they're concerned. In the UK, it's regulated, so that money has to go to a government-backed deposit scheme. But it's still a lot of money. It's limited on the amount of cover that the landlords can get and the amount of protection that landlords can get. And it's quite clunky and there's a lot of compliance for the agent and so on. So we've created a super lightweight, easy, insurance-backed alternative that costs the tenant less upfront, covers the landlord more, and is a more efficient product for the agents to administer.
Win, win, win.
Yeah, so it's great. Yeah, really, really good. And we're the leading deposit alternative provider in the UK now.
Fantastic. And you've been doing this now for the last 4 years, right?
Yeah, I started in April 2020. Yeah,
I remember when I got that call from you. Hey, can you have a look at this and see what we can do?
Yeah, you guys helped with the branding, which was great, and we still use it.
Yeah.
I was working on your presentation template this morning that you've still given us. Yeah,
fantastic.
Exactly.
Okay, good. It was a good investment then.
100%.
Brilliant. And so there's one big learning which you were talking to me before, which was about you're doing something different at Reposit, which is really focusing, again, on the mantra of getting the right people around you.
Yeah.
But also this time, rather than just trying to bring in people with different experiences into the team, investing in the people to help them build their own knowledge base and also build their own courage and, I suppose, confidence to fix Reposit's unique problems, right? Talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, about sort of building up the team. So I think part of what comes with hypergrowth with Uniplaces is you kind of have to go at an artificially fast pace, right? Mm-hmm. And people don't necessarily learn that fast, and cultures can't necessarily evolve that fast, right? So you end up hiring in external execs who have been there, done that, got the t-shirt before, so that they can kind of guide you through at least the known things. So don't do this because it kind of never works, so you could at least cut off like half the possible mistakes. Mm-hmm. But then again, what you're doing in bringing in all these external execs is you're kind of keeping your other people down to a certain extent, because you're limiting the sort of opportunities for their growth. And for me, that was a huge learning point, because actually when the new CEO came in, one of the things he did was actually build up the kind of more junior team, and it worked super well. And these were people that I'd worked with, and I knew they were good, so I was almost like, I should have given that person like more of an opportunity and so on. And I should have retained that person. I should have fought harder to retain that person. And so lots of people lessons. And I told you earlier, like Miguel was like the people guy, and that was very true. I think I had to learn. My people lessons are very kind of hard learnt, and I think I'm a lot better now than I used to be. Because it's absolutely essential for business, of course. Right? And so when I came to Reposit, I really wanted to do that. I wanted to give people in the team who've worked so hard on building the business to that point, because I wasn't the founder, the opportunity to grow and see how far we could push them. And it's been great. They know intimately the product, the market, the problems, the solutions. They have great ideas because they're so in tune with the realities of the business. And they've just got skill sets to flourish. And it's sort of like, of course, like who was I to say as a 23-year-old, 24, 25, 26, right, raising all that money, like building a team of, hundreds of people, like who am I to say you can't do it?
Exactly, when you did it yourself.
So it was sort of like, what am I doing? It's like, let push people. And I always find it amazing how adaptable people and teams are. You lose a critical skill set, the rest of the team adapts, and you start realizing that you have those skills elsewhere in the team as well. And, I think it's just been a hugely effective way to help kind of grow the business in a lean way, because Reposit hasn't raised tons of money from external VCs. We've had angel funding. But we haven't, got the big VC ticket, and we're building it in a much more sustainable, profitable way. So it's also suited that kind of mode of growth and development as well, for sure.
Well, that's amazing, and I think that's a really interesting learning now which you are investing into the business. That's
and for sure, like if I did a VC-backed company again, I would still try to build up the people, like the core team, the junior people. I would still try to do that as much as possible.
Well, I think the world has learned from the lessons of the hyper growth and the hyper stage of VC, where money was free and money was cheap, and and actually people were always the more valuable mix. Yeah, and I think that's really, really critical.
For sure.
I've got about another podcast worth of questions just by listening to what you said, but I know that we're stuck
off the script.
No, I mean, I think we're right on, and your story is really interesting, but I've got two really important questions I'm going to ask you. One is the one I asked you before, so I hope you're thinking about that. You know what I'm talking about. And the first question is, So you came to Malta and you've made Malta your base. And you're raising kids over here, and I know that you're keen and working within sort of the whole venture space over here and helping people, build up their businesses. You're extremely generous and kind with your network and your time, and I know you're always ready to help and support people. Yeah. And yet I find that Malta's still at that stage where we're not short of good ideas, and we're not short of confidence to build homegrown businesses.
No.
But there's something stopping, Maltese businesses make it outside of Malta. My theory is that it's so easy to a certain extent to become number one in the country that then it's very comfortable at the top. Yeah. And people don't take that extra hard step to make it outside of the country. Yeah. Looking at it from the outside in, what's your thought process on this?
You might not like the answer.
That's fine.
I think it's a function of market size. Mm-hmm. It's just a function of market size. There's no surprise as to why the biggest, best companies come out of, the US or China, or, maybe not the best, but the biggest, even let's say the biggest out of those markets, right? It's because they have huge home markets. Yeah. Right? So you always have an advantage in your home turf, because you have the networks, you get the culture intrinsically and so on. And so if you can just launch a business to millions of people on your doorstep.
As opposed to a few thousands.
Yeah, exactly.
So does that come back to your, what you mentioned before? You've got to burn those bridges. You need to get out and you need to be ready to build it somewhere else if you want to go big.
I think, listen, I'm not saying that you can't start a business from Malta. I don't want to discourage that.
No, of course.
For sure. You can start a business from Malta, but you have to be, I think if I was starting a business that I had visions to be international, I would think about what market my product is going to be
best fit
for, and also where I feel I have the best fit. Like, I'm not going to start a business in Germany because I don't speak German. I'm not German. And I've got the UK, which is a good market for me to operate in. So I'd much rather that just makes sense for me. And I wouldn't shy away from those factors at all. But you've got to look for a market where it's big enough for you to just keep going. Because businesses get so complicated so easily with scale. Mm-hmm. You need to find, and this is in my sort of personal selection criteria, a business idea, a product or a problem that you can solve, where you have one product, one solution, one market, and you can already get to scale. You need that if you've got that level of ambition. Maybe it's the type of businesses. Maybe you can launch a business like that in Malta, but it has to be in a different industry. Yeah. Maybe in shipping or construction or something like that, right? But if
we've got enough construction.
Yeah, I know. Well, there's construction tech plays and things like this, but maybe if you're doing sort of software as a service, which a lot of people are looking at these days, that's probably not the way, the place you're going to get big with that. So if launch it from home, but always stay close to your customers and always have that market in mind. And I think eventually it would be difficult not to kind of then ultimately sort of build the business in that market.
Some good words of wisdom to end our podcast. So, final question.
Oh no, I haven't thought of it.
Ben Grech, soundtrack of your life. You've got a random jukebox.
Can I say just because I feel like I need to give you an answer.
I'm also persistent,
Yeah, you are. I'm sure. It's not because it means anything, but I just love it. And the Starboy Daft Punk.
Well, that's
song,
a good song.
It just makes you feel cool, way cooler than I am. And I like listening to that song. And my wife's going to laugh when she hears this because I'm absolutely not a Starboy.
Fantastic.
But that just that's like a feel good. Yeah, I'm that escapism, that you can get sometimes.
Amazing, yeah. Ben. We've done this.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
It's been like a great lecture for me. I've really enjoyed listening to you. Some really good wisdom.
Well, you really kind of touched on a few pertinent points in the story, so I think it's been really fun. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.
Thanks, Ben. Cheers.
Thank you.